So let's get started. Basically, we're going to be dealing with the very early TV. But before we get into that, let's take a look at television. Now, I was born in blah, 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 and had one of the earliest TVs. My father, GI, didn't want to be left behind. And when they had a few dollars in their pocket, they went out and bought a TV. This way he could stay home after work and have a good time with his family. And so we bought this little television. So I grew up with television. I was always thought TV didn't happen until I was born, until I was a baby. And I was wrong. So look at this history. Motion pictures first were demonstrated in France in 1895. Yes, in 1888, we had Edison, but this was the motion pictures that were displayed on a screen. Now, the cathode tube was developed in 1897, and this tube was a gun, and it was the tube that allowed television to come into being. It was used by almost all computer monitors and televisions until the LCD and plasma screens were developed. So it was an important factor in development of television. Television images were first produced by the cathode tube in 1907, 1923. The iconoscope, the forerunner of the picture tube, was patented. And just to put everything in perspective, sound came to motion pictures in 1927 with a jazz singer. Okay, it's not working. That would work. Okay. Now, throughout the 1920s and 30s, scientists experimented with television cameras, receivers, and broadcasting in general. And you can see what the TV sets look like from the 20s and the 30s. On the bottom left of the pictures, you can see what the pictures look like when they were received on one of these consoles. They were not clear, they were not big, and they were just very difficult to view. Why it went backward? Okay, in 1930, RCA conducted experiments in black and white broadcasting, and NBC and CBS started broadcasting television. In 1936, the first TV broadcast was made available in London, and there was a proposal in 1938 for color television. In 1938, at the New York World's Fair, all the major electronic manufacturers were introducing to the public consumer television sets. People stood in line for hours to get a chance to see a television set. And of course, the first color broadcast was in 1940. Now, you're going to ask, why did it take so long for television to be developed in the United States if they could broadcast in London, if they could broadcast in France, where they were broadcasting in the 30s? And the reason was because there was a patent war going on between Philo T. Farnsworth, it does sound like a comic name, but that was really his name, who patented a television camera, and the manufacturer RCA. RCA wanted to buy the patent, but Farnsworth only wanted to license them. In 1939, the case was settled and American television was off the ground. Now, what happened was, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, all television manufacturing was banned for the duration of the war. Yet in the United States, there was still television broadcasting. but of course it was on a limited basis. RCA provided television sets for New York City hospitals who were treating injured servicemen, and they produced 2 nights a week programming. NBC and CBS also broadcast civil defense programs. In 1943, Philco, who owned the Philadelphia station, broadcast the Army Penn football game. And a station in Los Angeles broadcast a regular schedule of television. 1945, the end of the war, and television set production started again. Now, only 100 sets were manufactured and were snapped up by those who were on the waiting list from the pre-war. In the United States, there were fewer than 7,000 working television sets, whether they were commercially built or built by amateurs. And only 9 stations were on the air, 3 in New York City, 2 each in Chicago and Los Angeles, and 1 in Philadelphia, and 1 in the GE headquarters in Schenectady, New York. And you can see one of the earliest TV sets. This is more like the one that we had in our house. In 1946, the demand for TV sets increased dramatically as the GIs came home from war. RCA produced its first mass-produced model, and it sold initially for $352, and approximately 10,000 units were sold by the end of the year. Other manufacturers used the RCA chassis and placed it in a cabinet of their own design. Also, in 1946, in May, The Hourglass, the first hour-long musical variety show, airs over the 3 NBC stations in New York, Schenectady, and Philadelphia. In June, NBC and Gillette staged what they call the first television sports extravaganza, the Joe Louis-Billy Cohn heavyweight fight in Yankee Stadium. It was a great success with an approximate audience of 150,000 watching 5,000 sets. For every TV set tuned into the fight, there were on average 30 people watching, many seeing an event on TV for the first time. In October, Fairway Hills became the first TV soap opera airing on the new Dumont network. In 1946, Darrell F. Zanuck, who headed 20th Century Fox, said, "Television won't be able to hold on to any market it captures after the first 6 months. People will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box every night." 1947. In May, live theater came to television. It was an equivalent to the Broadway theater stage, and it was the first regular commercially sponsored program. It was the Kraft Television Theater. In March, FCC postponed a final decision on color TV, but reaffirmed a go-ahead on existing standards. I'm not sure what the standards were, but it wasn't until the 60s that the situation was finally settled. NBC debuted Meet the Press in 1947. It was a made-for-TV news conference. It became the oldest series on network television. Now, after World War II, the growth of television was largely due to comedy. Now, comedy was perfect for television because it could be performed with few participants, and it could have little action before one camera. Now we would call it stand-up. It allowed people to forget the war, the loss, the restrictions, the limitations, and the rationing that they had endured. And the growth of television comedy is said to be due to 3 important programs: the Marionette, the Tuesday night shtick, and the Yenta. The Marionette. 1947, Howdy Doody premieres on NBC, and he became the first main character of the first iconic program of the first generation nurtured on TV. He became the first boomers superstar. By the way, do you notice his freckles? He had 48 freckles, one for each U.S. state at the time. Now, the Marionette Howdy Doody first appeared on TV 2 days after Christmas, and the show was called Puppet Playhouse, and it was hosted by Bob Smith, who later became Buffalo Bob Smith because he was from Buffalo, New York. It was originally an hour show on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The show moved to Monday through Friday at 5:30 to 6:30 in 1948 in September. It was an extremely popular show, but the demise of the show demonstrated the financial realities of the new medium, television. In 1956, the early evening time slot that Howdy Doody had became more attractive to older consumers, and the show was moved to Saturday morning. Although it continued to receive high ratings, the expense to produce was eventually its downfall. It was taken off the air on September 24th, 1960, after 2,343 programs. Now let's take a look.
Howdy doody 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 ho ho ho. Well, howdy doody, kids, and hey, Mr. Smith. Hi, little guy, howdy. And Clarabelle, look at all the kids at home and all the kids in the gallery. What time is it, kids? Howdy doody time. Sure, let's be good loud now. Let's go. And hi, everybody. Hi, howdy doody.
And that was Howdy Doody. Interestingly enough, Howdy Doody ran for president in 1948. Tuesday night shtick. Milton Berle. Milton Berle began his show business career at 5 when his stage mother entered him in a Charlie Chaplin contest, and he won a tin cup. And then he made his screen debut being thrown from a speeding train by star Pearl White on location in Fort Lee, New Jersey, in The Perils of Pauline. He went on to Hollywood, where he appeared in 50 or more silent films. In 1929, at the age of 12, he made his Broadway debut. I don't think that's right. It should be I believe it was 1919. I'm not sure. Yeah, 1919. At 16, he worked solo as a master of ceremonies in vaudeville, getting into everybody's act, creating the brash, flip style that became his trademark. He was honing his craft, and he became a scholar of comedy. And he collected jokes, jokes, and comic sketches, and just jokes themselves. As Berle said jokingly, "It's not true. I never stole a joke in my life. I just find them before they get lost." By 1929, he was earning up to $25,000 a week performing in nightclubs in what show business insiders called the most perfect comedy act in the business. In 1929, while appearing in Chicago, he was invited to appear on an experimental TV station. As he remembered, so we went over and I did it. I walked in there and the lighting was just the worst. Fluorescent lights. They had black lipstick on me. I looked like Pola Negre or Theda Bara, and that's the first time that I was on TV. Notice the makeup. This is how they put makeup on in the early experimental television days. If they didn't have this, you couldn't see their faces. In October of 1938, Berle made a screen test for Samuel Goldwyn, but RKO signed him. He did 4 films, mostly musical comedies, all released in 1941 by 20th Century Fox. His best role was dramatic. He played Moe Finkelstein in Otto Preminger's Margin for Error in 1943. The performance was described by Photoplay magazine as he gives the performance of his career as the Jewish cop. His lines sparkle like icicles in the sun. Now, he first appeared in radio in 1929 with Rudy Valley. Then between 1934 and 1940, he was a regular on at least 6 different radio programs, including Milton Berle. In the spring of 1948, he began the radio show Texaco Star Theater, which was a hit. And it had writers, which included people you might know, Nat Hiken and Danny and Neil Simon. Milton stated, "I never really had a big success on radio because what I did was too visual. Audibly and verbally, it didn't play." In 1948, Berle's showbiz pals called television amateur hour or amateur night, and no star wanted to go into it. Anyway, he was one of 7 stars tested to do a summer television show for Texaco. It was called the Texaco Star Vaudeville Show, and it debuted in 1948 at a radio studio at Rockefeller Center. It was a trial run. They couldn't make up their mind what they really wanted to do. NBC played a little role in the launch of this show or finalizing what it was going to be about. Berle was just one of 3 MCs that rotated during the summer. The other 2 were Jack Benny and Jimmy Durante. On September 21st, 1948, Tuesday, there was a live broadcast from Studio 6B in the RCA building in Rockefeller Center. He became the permanent host, the de facto director, and even the overseer of musical arrangements. The show caught on immediately, becoming TV's first big hit, garnering the highest rating of any radio or television show then on the air from the first Nielsen rating. And that rating was 79.9. No other show came close. Now, of course, Milton recalled, "I had a rating of 83. Of course, in those days, there were only 83 sets. My mother owned 82. Tuesday nights belonged to Milton Berle. And just before the show aired at 8 o'clock, everything in America seemed to stop so people could gather around the television set to watch his show. The show was so popular, it was the only TV program not preempted Tuesday, November 2nd, 1948, for the Truman-Dewey presidential election returns. NBC delayed its election night coverage 1 hour to air the program. People watched Milton Berle on television, whether they owned a TV set or not. They went to other people's homes to view, or they even stood in front of storefronts, hardware stores, appliance stores, to watch TVs set to the program. When Milton Berle debuted in 1948, there were only 500,000 TV sets in the entire country. By mid-season, there were over 1 million. By 1954, more than 26 million American homes had at least two television sets. Berle is reputed to have sold more television sets than any advertising campaign. His audience spanned all ages. Children made up a large part of the audience. When children wouldn't go to bed until the show was over, parents wrote to him by the thousands, begging him to help. Berle said, "Now all you little kids, I want you to listen to Uncle Milty and go to bed right after the show is over." At the age of 40, with 35 of those years in show business, Milton Berle became Uncle Milty and an overnight success. Let's take a look at it.
We're the men of Texaco. We work from Maine to Mexico. There's nothing like this Texaco of ours. Our show tonight is powerful. We'll wow you with an hour full of howls from a shower full of stars. We're the merry Texaco men. Tonight we may be showmen. Tomorrow we'll be servicing your cars. I wipe the pipe, I pump the gas, I rub the hub, I scrub the glass, I touch the clutch, I mop the top, I poke the choke, I sell the pop, I clear the gear, I block the knock, I jack the back, I set the clock. So join the ranks of those who know and fill your tanks with Texaco. Sky Chief, fill up with Sky Chief, and you will smile at the pile of new miles you will add. Fire Chief, fill up with Fire Chief, you'll find that Texaco's the finest friend your car has ever had. And now, ladies and gentlemen, introducing America's #1 television star, who's just been a roaming all around the country, Milton Berle. Please don't laugh. Now you know what you look like. How do you like this? It's an awful draft around here. Anybody got a hunting license? What are you waiting for? How do you like this? Isn't it wonderful what you got to go through for a lousy $15,000 a week? Isn't it murder? The Greeks had a word for this. And if you don't know the word, ask President Truman. It is really... thank you, Democrats. It is really wonderful. I want to tell you, I wore this. You've heard of cruising down the river? Looks like they dragged me out of one. I want to tell you, I wore this on account of the springtime. Lovely. Yesterday was the first day of spring. I knew it. I woke up. I found a blue jay at the end of my corn. But hurry up, please. It's up. I can't hear myself. I got the wig on. But you've heard of Julius Caesar? I'm his brother Sid. Sid Caesar, another show. But I want to tell you, it's spring, and I love the springtime. It's really wonderful. I know it's spring because next week they're going to spring my brother, but this is really the truth. He was just arrested for having flat feet. They found his feet in the wrong flat, but this is really thank you, your name and address. This is really... No, I'm kidding. My brother, is he money mad? No kidding, he's mad every time I don't give him any money. I'm not kidding. I got a brother who's afraid to go to sleep. He dreams he's working. He dreams he's working. Hurry up! This is only an hour show. I got to get it all in. And this is... But I want to tell you, oh, Milton, you're wonderful, you're wonderful. I don't know what you got, but whatever it is, get rid of it. This is really I feel good. No kidding. I love this weather. I was in the park. There's nothing like getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, take a long walk around the park and taking a cold shower. There's nothing like it. So why bother with it? I want to tell you, it's really, I was in the park this afternoon. It was gorgeous. The birds were flying. The trees were sighing. The sailors were trying. You know, it's remarkable. It has been... Don't applaud. I do this as a sideline. I do this so I can eat. It is, speaking of eating, I would like you to meet a man that eats today like there's no tomorrow. Chubby boy, Alan Roth. Let's give him a hand. Come on. Isn't it cute? Take a boo. Look at that stomach. Well, that's what we use for belly laughs. You know, it's... He's on a diet, too. From the front, he looks like Sidney Greenstreet from the back. But you're on a diet, aren't you? He really just rubbed 3 cafeterias off his list. But this is really the truth. Oh, this I got to hold the music, will you? This is the truth. Alan's been... I got to laugh at this because I heard it. Alan has been gone with a girl steady for 10 years. Look, and so the other day she says, Alan, let's get married. She says, all right, who'll have us? You know, it's remarkable. This man. But, Mom, wake up. Mother is sleeping. But I would like, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce the first show tonight. We have a wonderful show prepared for you. And it looks, you know, I can tell when I walk out here that if we have a good audience. I can just look around the audience and see if they're appreciative. Good night. So, ladies and gentlemen, on with the show.
In the midst of his success, his agent negotiated the most unheard of contract in television history. And it really was a blessing and a curse. Milton made history because he signed an unheard of 30-year exclusive contract with NBC Television. He would be paid $200,000 a year, whether he performed or not, but restricting his television work to NBC. As Milton joked, I have a 30-year contract with NBC. Really, 30 years. And the lawyer who drew it up for me got the same sentence. This limited his opportunities after his show was canceled, and he never achieved a fraction of his early success. Now the Yenta, Molly Goldberg. Let's take a look.
Hello. I don't know. Hello is such a little word for such a big feeling. I want to say hello to you with all the letters in the alphabet. That would be a hello. Anyway, hello.
Before Martha, before Oprah, there was Gertrude Berg, creator and star of The Goldbergs.
Gertrude Berg invented the sitcom and wrote it.
Don't forget, David, darling. Marriage is just not an express train where you get on the first station and you get off the last station. Don't forget, David, darling. There are local stops in between.
Gertrude Berg is the most famous woman in America you never heard of.
She was no shrinking violet.
The press dubbed Gertrude Berg the first lady of radio.
Well, now, you're one of the few people I've ever known who both write and act. Which do you prefer?
Act. When you live with a character, as long as I've lived with Molly, it gets a little confusing. I'm really Molly more hours through the day than I am Gertrude Berg.
When Molly started selling things, it was pioneering in every way.
With a little boiling water and no coffee pots to watch. 1, 2, 3, you have a delicious cup of Sanko coffee.
You remembered it, and you shopped.
Gertrude Berg was the first Best Actress Emmy winner and a Tony Award winner.
Everybody loved Molly Goldberg. Didn't matter if you were a Catholic nun or a Jewish person.
Leave the matzah crumpets. Also the matzah scones.
You didn't think about religion or even ethnicity. Listening to Molly Goldberg, you thought about families.
Gertrude Berg was an inviting, matronly character. She personified Molly Goldberg, and she was the key to the show's success. Molly is married to Jake, a wedding gown manufacturer, and was the mother of Rosalie and Sammy. They lived at 1030 East Tremont Avenue, apartment 3B in the Bronx, paying $78 a month rent. The show also featured Molly's uncle, who worked for Jake, Mrs. Bloom, Molly's longtime friend and neighbor. She would start her show, as you saw in the little clip, yelling out the window, "Mrs. Goldberg," and Molly sometimes would yell out, "Mrs. Bloom." Now, the series started on radio in 1926, and that's what the TV show was based on. And it ran on CBS from 1949 to 1951, NBC from 1952, off and on until 1953, and then on the Dumont network from 54 April to October. And again, Gertrude Berg wrote, produced, and starred on this TV show. Now, the character of Molly Goldberg was endearing, but she kind of anticipated Lucy Ricardo. She was somewhat scatterbrained, a homemaker, who had great intentions, but these good intentions often led her to comic mishaps. Most of all, the Goldbergs offered a genial portrait of domestic life, centered, like most situation comedies, around a series of minor disruptions that were handily resolved by the end of each installment. Like Fiddler on the Roof, it was universal in appeal. It often offered nostalgia to all the children and grandchildren of immigrants from all over the world, telling them we are all Americans. At the same time, the Goldbergs offered millions of Americans an image of second-generation American families, and a Jewish family, a Jewish American family whose Jewishness was, for the most part, a matter of manners of speech, with only the occasional Yiddish interjection, "No? Oi." Unfortunately, in 1950, the House Un-Americans Activity Committee accused Gertrude Berg's popular co-star, Philip Loeb, who was an active union organizer. General Foods immediately pulled its sponsorship, and CBS dropped the show from its lineup. That's why it moved from CBS, the show. Gertrude, see, I'm doing the same thing everybody else did in the world. She appealed to the sponsors. She appealed to the networks. And she even appealed to Cardinal Spellman of New York, who told her he would help her if she did one thing: convert to Catholicism. Now, in turn, Gertrude was also blacklisted as a communist supporter through her association with Philip Loeb. Finally, Gertrude and Philip realized there was no hope for him, and they settled the lawsuits out of court. In 1955, unable to work and support his schizophrenic son, Loeb committed suicide, and it devastated Gertrude Berg. The show floundered after that, having been on hold for close to 2 years. The show rebounded with casting first Harold Stone for one season and then Robert Harris as a replacement for Loeb. The Goldbergs in the last seasons moved from the Bronx to the suburbs, but the show ended just a few years later. By 1948, advertisers accepted the medium of television. Throughout the year, 933 sponsors bought TV time, and that was a rise of 515% over the previous year. Needed, of course, were more shows to sell the products. By the fall, the FCC had issued 108 licenses for new stations, with hundreds more applications pending across the nation. 1948 also saw the debut of the Ed Sullivan Show, which was originally called The Toast of the Town. It was sponsored by Lincoln Mercury, and the show became one of the TV's longest-running shows and the most successful variety show of all times. It aired on CBS until 1971, and it advanced the scores of show business careers. One of those careers was Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and they appeared on TV for the first time on the Ed Sullivan Toast of the Town. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis were an Italian singer from Steuben, Ohio, and a Jewish comic from Newark, New Jersey. They did a comedy act in which first debuted in Atlantic City in July of 1946. Dean Martin was the straight man, and Jerry Lewis was the comic foil. But it didn't hit. It wasn't a hit. So they threw out their pre-scripted gags and improvised the way through the act. They were a hit, and this shtick became the basis of their act, which consisted primarily of Jerry Lewis interrupting and heckling Martin while he was trying to sing, and ultimately the two of them chasing each other around the stage. But most of all, they were having as much fun themselves as possible. The secret was that they both, and they both said it, was that they essentially ignored the audience and played to one another. In 1948, they teamed up on a TV show called Welcome Aboard, which was sponsored by Admiral Television Sets. Then they debuted a TV version of the radio Martin and Lewis show, and their guest star was Bob Hope. But it was a lackluster show, and it only lasted, but it did last until 1953. Also in 1949, Martin and Lewis were signed by Paramount Pictures as comic relief in the film My Friend Irma. Their agent negotiated one of Hollywood's best deals ever. They received only $75,000 between them for their films with Wallace. But they could do one outside film a year, which they could co-produce through their own York Productions. They also had complete control of their club acts, records, radio and television appearances. Thus, Martin and Lewis earned millions of dollars. Colgate Comedy Hour was on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. It evolved from the 4-Star Review, sponsored by Motorola. The weekly program was hosted by 4 comedians in a 4-week rotation as competition for Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town. It was heavily backed by its sponsor, which eventually became Colgate-Palmolive, to the tune of $3 million in the first year. It was a spectacular success, especially for the hosts, Eddie Cantor and Martin and Lewis, and of course, the other duo, Abbott and Costello. During the 50-51 season, AT&T put together a regular service using a coast-to-coast coaxial microwave interconnection service, which allowed live broadcasts from both coasts. 2 production companies were quickly set up. Out of New York, Eddie Cantor was the host, but a heart attack caused the end of his association in the show in May of 1954, during which, previous to this, he introduced Eddie Fisher to television. Out of Los Angeles, Martin and Lewis and Abbott and Costello hosted. Now, this gave NBC a substantial edge over Ed Sullivan, since the top-grade talent for motion pictures could also do network TV on the West Coast. while Sullivan had to work with whomever appeared or happened to be in New York at the time, especially the time, I should say, the time that that episode aired. Although there had been a number of hugely successful comedy teams before, Martin and Lewis were a new kind of team. The fun they had together set them apart from everything else being done at the time. Both were talented entertainers, but in fact, they were also good friends on and off stage. And this took the act to a new level. And there was mourning in my house, as there were all over in the other houses all over America, when Martin left the act on July 25th, 1956, 10 years to the day after their first official team. And let's take a look. This is Martin and Lewis. Sorry about that.
I think that'd be real sweet.
Yeah, but without money, we can't do nothing. I lost all my money. You need arrangements and clothes to be an actor and all that.
The only thing you need to build a team is us. And that we got.
Together we got it. Yeah, but without money, what do you do?
Oh, we ain't got a barrel of money.
And maybe we're ragged and funny,
But we'll travel along.
singing a song side by side.
We don't know what's coming tomorrow.
And maybe it's trouble and sorrow,
But we'll travel the road.
sharing our load side by side.
Through all kinds of weather.
Whether
What if that rain should fall?
sky, we would be together. It doesn't matter at all.
Oh, when we've had our quarrels and parted.
We'll be the same as we started,
Just to travel along.
and singing a song side by side. You know, I like that, to sing together a number where you sing a word and I sing a word. It's like in show business real. Can we sing more of that?
Want to do another chorus?
Yeah, let's sing some more. I like that a lot.
Oh, the road gets a little bit bumpy.
And our nerves get a little bit jumpy,
We beat and complain.
but we remain side by side. There are times when his smile ain't so sunny,
Times when his fun isn't funny.
so we fuss and we pout,
But still we come out.
side by side.
Life can be demanding.
Life isn't always play.
We reached an understanding.
It's gotta be his way.
Parted us neatly.
But we have fooled them completely.
Had us both on a shelf.
Look for yourself, side by side.
Like Popsy and like Eva.
Tell it, Beanie Boy, tell it.
Always roll along.
We had our own Geneva. He admitted that I was wrong.
Please allow us to sum up.
If ever a problem should come up,
We'll fight like before.
but after the war,
Side
side
by
by
Sid Caesar. He first worked as a waiter in his father's restaurant, where he tried to double talk with a group of Italians who enjoyed it so much that they sent him over to a group of Polish people to repeat it in Polish, and so on with Russians, Hungarians, Frenchmen, Spaniards, Lithuanians, and Bulgarians. Despite his apparent fluency in many languages, Caesar could actually speak only English and Yiddish. From the age of 14, Caesar performed in the Catskills, Borscht Belt, and honed his skills. In 1939, he enlisted in the U.S. Coast Guard, where he honed his craft in the U.S. Coast Guard entertainment field, and he made contacts there, including Max Liebman, who would later produce Caesar's first TV series. After the war, he was the opening act for Joe E. Louis at the Copacabana. In 1948, he performed in Broadway, and this was the first time that he actually acted his double talk pantomime and music on stage before a huge audience. In 1949, Max Liebman, began producing and directing the weekly NBC Dumont show, The Admiral Broadway Review. He brought Caesar to the television with this review. It's remembered primarily because it brought together the comedy team of Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca. It was the predecessor of the television's golden age classic, Your Show of Shows. It lasted 19 weeks, after which, get this, the Electronic Corporation withdrew its sponsorship. It was said it withdrew its sponsorship because it could either sponsor the show or build a new facility to keep up with the production of television sets. They could not keep up, so they decided they were going to go and cancel the show. So, the Admiral Review also had his regulars, Margin Gower, Champion, and Bobby Van. It was Friday night all right, you get the word. Simultaneously broadcast on NBC and the Dumont Network in order for the show to be carried on the only TV station operating in Pittsburgh, Dumont's WDTV. The show was an immediate success, but as I mentioned, it was canceled after 26 weeks. Your Show of Shows was the first 90-minute series on television. It ran from February 1950 to June 1954 on NBC. It was weekly, and it had top musical guests, large production number, and an outstanding cast of comedians: Sid Caesar, Carl Reiner, Howie Morris, and Imogene Coca. It also had high-quality material, which was a mixture of scripted and improvised comedy, movie, and television satires. Now, Caesar's inimitable double-talk monologues were a hit of the show also. This launched Sid Caesar into instant stardom. The show was responsible for bringing together one of the best comedy teams in television history. And many writers became denizens of the writer's room, and they also got their break creating the show's madcap scripts. They included Mel Brooks, Neil Simon, Woody Allen, Mel Tolkien, and Larry Gelbart. And they were the basis for the Dick Van Dyke Show characters: Dick Van Dyke, Rosemary, and Maury Amsterdam. Sid Caesar won his first Emmy in 1952. In 51 and 52, he was voted the U.S. Best Comedian by the Motion Picture Daily TV poll. The show ended after 160 episodes in 1954. One of the very few live series whose material is marred only by faulty kinescope remains as fresh today as it was when originally broadcast. In 1954, only a few months after the show of shows went off the air, Caesar returned to television with the Caesar Hour. The cast included Howie Morris, Carl Reiner, a young Bea Arthur, and much of the same season crew. Nanette Fabray replaced Imogen Coca, who left to star in her own short-lived comedy series. Ultimate creative and technical control was totally Caesar's. The show moved to the larger Century Theater, which allowed longer, more sophisticated productions, and the weekly budget was doubled to $125,000. Let's take a look.
Und mach die Feder da und brechen und brechen. Brechen und brechen machen. Halt! Du hast gejingelt, du Mädels. Du bist der Mädel-Jingler? Ja? Und das Mädel für die 50-Yard-Dash, was? Halten Sie ein, beschwänzen Art! Todbell! 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 1, 2, 3, 4! Mitmachen, General! Können Sie ihn machen? Ja, gut, gut, gut. Ein anderer? Ja, gut, gut, gut. Ja, ein anderer? Ja. Haben Sie hier nach mich belaufen, Parfüm spritzen? Parfüm spritzen! Du hast gespritzt in der Ei. Gespritzt auf das Ei? Ja. Ah, so. Gut. Das ganz gut machen, ein bisschen Ei, was fast ruhig mit der ganzen Ei und Kopf machen. Kopf machen, Kopf machen, Kopf machen, Kopf gemacht. Du, was hier machen, der Fool? Was ist gemacht, der Fool von mir? Hier, was machen, the front from the back, and back from the front, was machen, ist noch schwer, und dann kommen und gehen hier, was raus? So, mein General, ich mache einen Runaround. So! Kopf gemacht. Gut, Kopf. Ah, die kleine Walzenschei, alte kleine Arme, ja, das sind die Rutschebellen. Ah. Hier haben wir auf dein Wohl, du bist der Schleckes meiner Wahl. Du bist der Schleckes, Herr General? You bet your sweet life, yeah. Hier wird das Ding, was das soll, ja. Oh, hier. Oh, das ist wunderbar, hier. Mach Kissen. Kissen machen. Ach, gut, das Time, was macht ihr dann? Das Appointment, das macht gut bei ihr. Ah, gut. Gut, mein Herr, auf der Auto steht. So, Herr General. Gut, mach hier Auto steht. Ja. Guten Abend. And you don't know it, you don't know it. Say, I can't say it.
The last person we're going to talk about today is Victor Borga. Not as great a star as some of these others, but someone that I always loved. He was born in Denmark. His parents were musicians. He was a musical prodigy, starting piano lessons at the age of 2 and gave his first recital at 8. He was awarded a full music scholarship to the Royal Danish Academy of Music and played his first major concert in 1926. He was soon aware that he was Jewish. He belonged to the country's tiny Jewish minority, and as he later told the New York Times music critic, a schoolboy called me Jew boy. When I went home, I asked my mother what Jew boy meant. That got me angry. It fired me up. Little by little, I felt that I had to be better than any of my schoolmates. And I could do that because I was a natural musician and a good student. In 1933, after a few years as a classical concert pianist, he started a stand-up comic act with a signature blend of piano music and jokes. During the 30s, he was Denmark's most popular entertainer. He appeared in 4 Danish films, and he started touring exclusively in Europe, where he began telling anti-Nazi jokes. One of his jokes from this period was, "What is the difference between a dog and a Nazi? A Nazi lifts its arm." When Germany invaded Denmark in 1940, he topped the Nazi hit list. But Borga was playing a concert in Sweden and managed to escape to Finland. He escaped to New York on the USS American Legion, the last neutral ship to make it out of Finland. He arrived in 1940 with only $20, which today would be $332, and $3 went to customs fees. He didn't speak any English, but he quickly managed to adapt his jokes to American audiences, learning English by watching movies. He took the name Victor Borga. He was disguised as a sailor when he returned to Denmark during the occupation to visit his dying mother. In 1941, he started on Rudy Valley's radio show, but was hired soon after by Bing Crosby for his Kraft Music Hall. He rose to fame quickly and won Best New Radio Performer in 1942. He soon after, he was offered roles in movies, such as Frank Sinatra's Higher and Higher. While hosting the Victor Borga Show on radio, he developed many of his trademarks, including repeatedly announcing his intent to play a piece, but getting diverted by something like making comments about the audience or discussing the usefulness of Chopin's Minute Waltz as an egg timer. He would start out with some well-known classical piece like Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and suddenly move into another harmonically suitable tune such as Night and Day by Cole Porter, or even Happy Birthday to You. He appeared in 1944 on an experimental TV show, a variety show. He co-hosted the All-Star Review on NBC from 1950 to 1953, and he had a weekly program for a few months in 1951. He also became a regular in the 1950 show Arthur Murray's Dance Party. He appeared 23 times on Ed Sullivan's Show between 1949 and 1965. Now, he expressed humanistic ideals in his performances, and he also expressed them in his life. He was active in charitable and endeavors, including he co-founded Thanks to the Danes, later renamed Thanks to Scandinavia, which offered scholarships to Scandinavians to study in America and Israel as a gesture of gratitude for efforts to protect Scandinavian Jews during World War II. And these endeavors continued after his death. And in 2004, the Victor Borga Foundation donated $250,000 to help construct Copenhagen's new Danish Jewish Museum. Ultimately, Borga was right. Audiences didn't need another Heifetz, Horowitz, but the world would have been a sadder place without Victor Borga.
I can't hear a thing myself. Coming up.
I found that people who speak English sometimes fail to understand each other to perfection, and that is because they neglect to use punctuation marks when they speak. And that is why I have invented the phonetic punctuation, which means that while we speak, we will integrate punctuation marks by adding sounds to them, so that we can underline our sentences when we speak, as well as we do when we don't. I'll teach you how to use the system. It is very simple. A period sounds like this. The dash. An exclamation point is a vertical dash with a period underneath. A comma. Quotation are two commas. Or if you happen to be left-handed. Question mark is rather difficult. Finally, the colon. That's all. I'm going to read a short story to you so you can hear how the system sounds when it is being used in kind of a hurry. I have chosen a story by Shakespeare, which is in this book, and I shall just find it. Shakespeare. Shakespeare, C under S. A Shakespeare. Seafood. Oh, see footnote. I'm sorry. For further information, see above. In the open window, there suddenly came light. Beautiful Elinor sat alone, dreaming of but one thing. 2 years had passed since she met Sir Henry. She could still remember the unhappy evening when her father had thrown him out. They had been sitting in the park, and Henry had said, "Darling, is this the first time you have loved?" She had answered, "Yes. But it is so wonderful that I hope it will not be the last." It's getting a little messy here. Suddenly she heard a well-known sound. It was he. In 2 strides he was near her, embraced, kissed, and caressed her. Henry, what is love? And he answered, "Well, I couldn't live without it." She asked, "I'm sorry, where have all your thoughts been this while?" And he answered, "With thee, my maiden." Suddenly he was gone. All she heard was the well-known sound of his departing horse.
Next time, we'll be dealing with Jack Benny, Burns and Allen, and many, many more. And now it's time for questions and answers. Well, let's see if I can get out. Will somebody help me get out of this? Thank you.
So, Lois, I'm going to take a minute. I'm Debbie Golditch. I'm the International President of Women's League. I want to welcome 483 women who are here with us this afternoon. We want to thank Karen Tenesaka, who's our Member Relations Coordinator, who helped with the Zoom this afternoon. And most of all, Lois, there were lots of questions from people in the chat who want to know who you are and what you do professionally that you could bring us such a wonderful program.
Well,
would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Oh, fine. Thank you. I am basically a retooled English teacher. I taught English literature. I taught media studies and anything else that they would throw at me. And I am teaching now at the State University of New York, Utica, Rome, and it's changed names 15 times since I've been there. And I teach film, I teach television, and all sorts of different things. And I enjoy myself a lot because it's fun. And I grew up, as I mentioned at the beginning, I grew up with television. My mother used it as a babysitter. And I remember being homesick. And granted, it wasn't often, but I remember watching all these old TV shows, Arthur Godfrey and, it was Gary Moore and all of these old shows and loving it. We also saw old movies too. So I hope that answered it.
It did. And tell us about the next series. The dates I have, Rabbi put them on there, March 15th between 3 and 4 East Coast time. Want to tell us a little bit more about the program?
There isn't one in February?
There is. February 22nd and March 15th, 3 to 4 p.m.
The next one will go and deal with George Burns, Gracie Allen, and some of the comedians who were on TV through Ed Sullivan and other series. I found that there's so many Jewish people who were comics on TV. It was they went from the Borscht Belt to television, or Vaudeville to the Borscht Belt to television. And that's how it was a great liberating medium, television. You didn't have to be a great actor, but if you could tell a good joke, you could get your own show.
So the comment here that says it's interesting that so much of this humor is physical and slapstick.
Well, early humor, yes. Early television had limitations on how much action you could have. The cameras were huge at the very, very beginning. And of course they became smaller. But again, these were vaudeville. Many of these people were vaudeville or Borscht Belt comics who were physical, who used physical comedy. There were other people like a Jack Benny who were stars in radio, who were less physical. But as the cameras became smaller, as the technology became better, that's when you had more shtick, more movement. Did that answer?
I think so. So there was a question about whether or not this will be recorded, and it will be recorded. And I just want to make mention that for every recording that you see on the Women's League website, Lois edits those recordings and puts them on. So thank you, Lois, for doing that for Women's League. We appreciate all that you do for us. And this will be recorded after Lois edits it, and she will put it on the Women's League website. We're making you work double time today, Lois. And it will be there. So thank you so much for that. Let's see. Did I miss anything, Danya, Rabbi, Julia, anybody? We're all monitoring the chat. There's a lot of messages here. Someone did ask
comments than questions, a lot of them.
Right.
I'll take a look at the comments, and if I can find your email addresses, I'll write back. How's that? As I said, it was very interesting growing up, as many of you know. I grew up in the New York area, and we had basically 3 networks and at least 4 independent stations. We would watch cartoons on all of them, and that in itself is another course, the cartoons. And we had rabbit ears. You all remember the rabbit ears? Anything above Channel 7, which was ABC, you would be going like this. You can see my television. You see the TV? You take those rabbit ears and you'd be moving them around. Once you got to Channel 13, forget it. You couldn't see anything at all. And that's where they would put all the great silent cartoons, black and white Max Fleischer cartoons. They were fun. So
just a question about where the Three Stooges fit in and Ernie Kovacs.
Ernie Kovacs was a pioneer. I didn't use him because he wasn't Jewish, okay? Not for any other reason. He was a genius. Things that we all say, oh, Monty Python this and Saturday Night Live that, were done first by Ernie Kovacs. He was wonderful. You can go online, do a search for Ernie Kovacs, and you can watch some of his old short programs. They were wonderful. They were more cerebral than you would get with Milton Berle or some of these other comics that were on TV. The Three Stooges were not TV stars. They were movie stars, quote unquote, who produced these shorts for movie theaters when they had long programs. You would have a newsreel, you would have a comedy show, you'd have coming attractions, you'd have a B movie, and then you'd have the A movie, the blockbuster movie. And the Three Stooges were the comedy act after the newsreel. And there were a number of teams that did such things before, for the movies. They would be in the movies. The other groups, other things that you might see instead of the Three Stooges would be Flash Gordon serials, or I don't know. There are all sorts of different things that you could see. They came to TV when there was RKO had a TV station, acquired Channel 9 in New York. It became WRKO. And they didn't have anything. They had they needed something to put on, and they had this huge warehouse full of RKO movies. Excuse me. That's my daughter trying to talk to me. I'm sorry. So anyway, so they would put on King Kong. This is a comedy in itself. They would put King Kong on for 3 times a day, 7 days a week. Then they would have children's shows, and they would put on this kind of thing. And then there was WPIX, and they also put on things. They would put on Max Fleischer cartoons and so on. So that's how they got to be television stars. They needed... Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about where did Groucho Marx fit in, and Fannie Brice?
Okay. These people, Groucho Marx, with his brothers, were vaudevillians, and they made, I think, 10 movies for various studios. My favorite was Night at the Opera. And they, in the late 40s, I believe they made their last movie. And I think that last movie was with Marilyn Monroe. I'm not quite sure, but that was around that time. And then they broke up. They were no longer a team. And Groucho Marx went to television, as did so many old movie stars. TV gave the movie stars second life, second career. And he basically did You Bet Your Life, a quiz show, kind of. I mean, he would give questions, and the duck would fall down when the magic word, the contestant would say the magic word. And that was his show. He told jokes. He reacted. He did his Marx Brother thing, his Captain Spaulding kind of humor. And that was what he did. I remember as a kid, he did one special that I know of. It was him in the Mikado. He played the Grand Executioner. And one of the maids from school was his daughter, the 3 little maids from school in Gilbert and Sullivan. So he continued this way. I don't know if he appeared too often as a guest on any of the variety shows. And Fannie Brice was a radio star, did some short movies. She did appear a number of times on variety shows, but she was not as well received as some of the, and she didn't necessarily have a long-running show of her own. In the early days of television, shows were not a half hour. Some of the early shows were 15 minutes. Nat King Cole had a 15-minute television show. And so did some of the other people. But Fannie Brice never, she might have had a TV show, but it wasn't long lasting, and it wasn't something memorable that I would say. So I think did I answer that one?
I think you did.
I can't see people's faces. If in a classroom you can see people's faces and you know if you've answered their question. Here you can't.
Great.
Thanks, Cindy.
I think pretty much we got them all. People have a lot of comments here about television and how they did not have television and went to a neighbor's house, or they had one small black and white one, and their memories of watching television and the early programs. And there's one comment that I wanted to respond to, which is that after last week, which was a really somber, very difficult week for many of us, you brought a lot of us some joy and laughter today, and we appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And I have to let you know, I'm glad I'm from where I'm from, and I had my background, because I could never fit everything in unless I could speak as fast as I was trained to do in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. So, again, there's so much to early television. So much was lost because they were recorded on film and the films disintegrated. But go on YouTube, explore some of these people. We didn't talk about Pinky Lee. We didn't talk about Maury Amsterdam. We didn't talk about some of the early TV stars in their programs. And they were good. They were good. I remember Maury Amsterdam, and I couldn't have been more than 2 or 3. So, okay. Anything else?
So again, the next session is February 22nd, and you do need to register for that the way you registered for this. If you have any difficulty, let us know and we'll help you do that. We want to thank Lois again for all her hard work and all she does for Women's League. I can't thank you enough, Lois. And we want to thank all of you for your continued support and all that you do. We hope that we're, meeting your needs during this unique and challenging time. And we're helping you to connect with Women's League and your sisters all over North America. Everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for being with us.